welcome to Bostonian Rap. I'm your host for this evening, Rachel Meiselman. This is a show that covers politics, current events, and social phenomena. On tonight's show, I am very pleased to have as a special guest, Bryan Fuller. He is running for a Boston City Council at-large seat. Bryan, thank you so much for joining me.
Rachel, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. So as I always say, let's get right into it.
Let's get right into it.
Let's get right into it. Now, you often reference your upbringing, your blue-collar roots. In fact, what I found interesting is that you said that you came from a very blue-collar household. Explain a little bit more about that, what that means. Mm-hmm. And as an extension of that question, tell me some of the more important lessons that you learned growing up.
That's a good question, Rachel. I grew up north of Boston and Hamilton. It's a pretty small town. When I was a kid, there was electricians, carpenters, plumbers. Those are the people my father knew. I call it a very typical upbringing in kind of a sad way. I think much like many people that are probably listening tonight. I grew up in a family that had some pretty serious substance abuse issues. My father had a real problem with alcohol, and so many people I've talked to have so many similar problems.
Sure.
And it's been it's an ongoing systemic problem across America. Sure. Especially when I grew up, it felt like all my father's friends were also alcoholics. So when I said it was very blue collar, I felt like, I think that was like, it just felt like all his friends were alcoholics. And when I say that, I just mean that, I felt like I was part of that community, okay. And if you weren't an alcoholic, you were just a normal, everyday person.
Okay. So maybe you mean it kind of, there's a dual sense. There's a sense blue collar is in working hard, because I come from a blue collar background
Sure.
too. And my father, sheet metal worker, local 17.
Love it.
And, he always berates me because I might be a minute late.
Oh, yeah.
Or 30 seconds late.
Oh, yeah.
But that's unacceptable. That's 30 seconds. That's a minute or 30 seconds too late. You value punctuality. You have a strong work ethic, mm-hmm. and there's one way to get ahead, and that's by working hard. So that's the sense blue collar. But then it sounds like
there's a dark side to it too as well.
Yeah. So there's a separate kind of world that you're talking about, or kind of like sometimes not necessarily parallel existence that you had.
My dad was an exceptionally hard worker. He would regularly put in 50, 60 hours, much like blue-collar workers across the country. But yeah, there was this other side to it. And growing up in my town, it just felt like, we got a little older, and he decided that he wanted to get away from alcohol. I spent most of my childhood in, the basements of churches and community centers, going to attending AA meetings, and I wanted to be part of his solution. And I felt like everybody he knew was there also. It's like they all decided at once that we're going to try to beat this together.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful, and that's why I felt like I was very much part of this community okay. of workers.
I see, and so that's it.
It's not a negative connotation.
Right. I see that.
It's a community thing.
Right. So then, once again, to kind of underline, what we're talking about. You have the traditional tenets, I think, that are attached with the blue-collar philosophy mindset, but then you're talking about what can happen. I mean, it's not necessarily exclusive to blue-collar,
no.
Not at all. But for you, in your particular case, it was.
It was. And I think, similar to other people in blue-collar families. They did okay, but we weren't rich by any stretch. And much like many other blue-collar families, or not blue-collar, many other alcoholic families, there was a lot of divorce. My father and mother split when I was 2. She took me off to California. Me and my little sister, she was only 6 months. And then my dad, he sued for custody in her absence and won. And my mother, negotiated with him to drop the charges or drop the case.
Sure.
And said, well, look, just take the boy, I'll keep the girl. And so she flew me back home when I was 4, and I essentially met my father for the first time when I was 4 years old. And it was, I can still picture it in my head because I was like, I don't know who this person is. And he had remarried to a lovely woman who stayed with him for 3 years until she couldn't handle it anymore. And then she left. But she was wonderful, though. She really raised me. And and then, and then it was just him and I, and we, after a couple really, 2 or 3 really tough years, he found AA, and I like to think I was a big part of the process for him. I would, remind him to go to meetings, and we'd attend it together, and sometimes I'd go to the Al-Anon meetings, or
Sure.
But I say typically because it just felt like everybody I knew had kind of a similar background that I grew up with.
And let me just say this, I really feel, and obviously I would never speak for you because you're doing quite well for yourself, but it would seem like this whole experience, and I'm sure in addition to other chapters in your life, have informed you so that today you're very driven to give back to your community. You're very driven to help others. Whatever their need may be, you're eager, you're willing to sit down and listen and say, okay, I hear you, I've got you. What can we do together to solve a problem? Would that be right? Would that be
Rachel, I think you've really hit on something with me. And, I learned at a very young age that, I learned that kind of the horrors of substance abuse. But, rather than reject my father, I want to be part of his solution to help him, come back to my life. I know we as a society sometimes look down on people with substance abuse issues, and there are people that need help. And I think the best way to treat people with issues like this is to get them help and bring them back into society rather than push them away or reject them, or in some cases incarcerate them. And at a very young age, I realized by helping him, get through this, I was helping myself. I could have walked away from the issue, but you're very right, though. I learned at a very young age